Why are they really protesting?
Well, I think you got it exactly right, John. It is part of the classic textbook of anarcho-tyranny and agitation and upheaval, and continuing and maintaining what Antifa and Black Lives Matter have done over the past year in making sure that many of these Democrat liberal cities are constantly in a state of so-called unrest. Is part of the playbook. And actually, I really hate that adjective. I'm sure people follow me on social media. When I see the liberal media talking about potential unrest, it is the ultimate euphemism for violence and looting. And of course, they won't talk about the vulgar spitting at police officers, the beating of people over the past week, stabbings in Washington, D.C. But it is somewhat distraction, but it also, of course, has a synergistic effect. And we have to define, of course, the terms of what's happened in the 24 hours since election night. That was all of the piece as well. It's its own kind of engineered chaos.
And thank you for checking me, because, I'm guilty of this. It's kind of a reflexive thing. You fall back on the word unrest because the first time you see the shot, it may just be protesters getting a little agitated, right? That might be unrest, but it never stops at that. So I'm guilty of that as much as anybody else, Michelle, but it's a good point because, this is one of the things, you have to define it as something and the situation changes. But when it comes to what we saw in Portland, it is so consistent with everything we've seen, whether they're protesting social justice, quote unquote, or election results, quote unquote, that they're not really protesting that, right? This is their default position for everything.
Yeah, that's right. There's actually no underlying principle. It's resistance for the sake of resistance. It's obstruction for the sake of obstruction. And again, these two things are not just parallel, they intersect. The engineered chaos of going to bed on election night and seeing Trump ahead and then waking up in the morning, and of course, not only waking up to all of these riots in the same places, but also a riotous atmosphere at many of these polling centers. And you just had both of the White House, you had your White House correspondent there, Emerald, talking about what's going on in these polling places that's led to these lawsuits. It's obstruction as well. And we have so many cases now of Republican poll observers and volunteers being blocked from watching and seeing what's going on. Stop the count is the hashtag that's taken off, but it really, again, that's not quite accurate and precise. It's show the count.
Yes.
We don't want these votes to be counted if nobody is being able to watch other than people who want Biden to win.
It's really not that controversial, Michelle. It shouldn't be for most people. We want all the legitimate ballots to be counted, and that's all we're asking for. We want all the illegitimate ballots to be thrown out and not counted. It's not that difficult. But when you know the history of Philadelphia specifically, you see the situation in Nevada. You can talk about Harry Reid and all the chicanery that goes on in Nevada politics when it comes to the casinos and all that other stuff. These are not pristine places where everything runs normally, and it's why we have to have so much focus on all these different places. And Michelle, I made jokes about, are there enough lawyers in America right now to really focus on this? And it's a legitimate question because it's not like 2000 with Florida. You have multiple situations all over the country. And what do you think ultimately is going to happen here? Do you think the American public at the end of the day is going to feel confident in the result no matter which way it goes?
I think the well has already been poisoned, unfortunately. This is going to drag on for weeks. I said that on election night. I've been warning about it for weeks. You have a constellation of non-governmental and nonprofit organizations on the left that have been geared up for this. No hyperbole, for 80 years now. My column this week was on the National Lawyers Guild, which is in the middle of all of this, and all of their legal organizations. And this is the ultimate test of whether the right has spent enough money to be prepared for exactly this moment. And my nails are bitten down. I mean, I'm down to my middle knuckles, John, on this. I know there are a lot of great people on the ground right now, as well as all of the grassroots poll observers and volunteers. They're the unsung heroes in all of this. And whether there are enough of them and whether or not it's too late, we're just going to have to see.
Hey, I talked